this is gonna be illuminating.
I just don't know why I should suffer because you have this ideological objection to feeling good.
Diane is a fearless fighter for the truth, but she can also be a killjoy who thinks feeling good is selfish and wrong.
I would love to feel good. What a luxury! How nice for you that you can do that while the world burns around you.
This attitude stems from what Diane herself would probably tell you is her biggest motivator, the desire to do the right thing. Always. And yet, out of all the primary characters, Diane is the one who's hated the most. Some fans like her, obviously, but Diane still gets more hate than BoJack, a literal monster who ruins everything he touches. She gets more hate than Princess Carolyn, a ruthless careerist with questionable morals. She even gets more hate than Todd and Mr. Peanutbutter, two nitwits who fail their way to the top without even trying because everyone thinks they're cute.
Hey, this guy, what'd you get arrested for? Being too cute? I want to be in his cell.
The hate for Diane is surprising, especially because the primary characters of BoJack Horseman are not like us. They're all animals, except Diane and Todd, but Todd is a comical over-exaggeration that couldn't possibly be a real human. Diane is the only one who is truly human. She's grounded and relatable and real. She's also the only one of the main characters who even bothers to concern herself with trivial matters like right and wrong and the fate of the world. But she gets like zero credit for that. So why? What is it about Diane constantly trying to do the right thing that rubs so many fans the wrong way? There are so many layers to this onion, so why don't we go ahead and get the first layer out of the way.
BoJack often felt the need to impress me with material items.
You can see from the teeny tiny brushstrokes that this is very expensive.
When we're introduced to Diane in season 1, the first thing that strikes you is just how cool and super chill she is. She is above all the petty materialism and status games that the rest of us mere mortals are so obsessed with. Diane is somebody who is way more concerned with higher pursuits, and you can just tell. But like many good people, Diane suffers from the curse of the virtuous. She carries around an almost condescending sense of moral superiority. She doesn't come out and just say she's better than you because that would be classless, but you can just feel it ooze out of every pore of her skin. This rubs some fans the wrong way, and eventually, even the in-world characters start to notice it.
Hey, I know that you can tweet for a living in a house in Beverly Hills that your husband bought, or you can think you're better than everyone, but you can't do both.
BoJack's memoir is a great example of this better-than-you attitude that Diane carries around everywhere. She spends time with him and becomes very friendly. He confides half of his deepest, darkest secrets in her, and she just uses them to rip him apart in his own memoir. It's the greatest betrayal since the time when I thought I was peeing on an electric fence because I'm a rebel, only to wake up and discover that I'd wet the bed. I was 6 at the time, but still. Dreams shouldn't do you dirty like that. BoJack is understandably mad at Diane for betraying his trust, but Diane is convinced that her approach of showing off BoJack as a massive loser is the correct one. When BoJack puts his foot down and refuses to approve the book for publication, Diane leaks it to her ex, and all of BoJack's most embarrassing secrets start trending on BuzzFeed. In any other universe, Diane's actions would lead to nothing but disaster, but in the BoJack verse, the writers put their thumbs on the scale and make the book sell 1 million copies. Diane is proven right, and BoJack accepts her as his lord and master. He doesn't get over the betrayal of trust, but she is the architect of his comeback, and he worships her anyway. He also has a massive crush on her because, of course, why not? She betrayed his trust and made him look like a loser to the whole world, but she's just so irresistible.
Open your eyes. BoJack's clearly in love with you.
Diane's better-than-you attitude continues in her marriage with Mr. Peanutbutter.
Why don't I write a book about how you married Mr. Peanutbutter because he's too dumb to see how much better you think you are?
The attitude sabotages that marriage, and when Mr. Peanutbutter moves on with Pickles, Diane just rips into her and then sabotages that relationship as well. But that alone is not enough to make so many people hate Diane. There's another layer to this onion.
I'm a hypocrite. I'm miserable, and I make other people miserable.
Despite Diane's commitment to doing the right thing, she doesn't always do it. Everybody has a theory.
You know what your problem is? You hold everyone to an impossible standard, including yourself.
Well, that's one theory. There are other fans who think Diane is just pretending to be a good person when she's really just as bad as BoJack, or probably worse. This scene is the perfect example.
In the state of California, it is illegal for a restaurant to serve people water before they ask for it.
When Diane is complaining about how people are being jerks by wasting water during a drought, she drops her own glass of water on the floor and spills it all. Then she keeps complaining about the drought and how everybody else is inconsiderate. Except her, the water spiller, of course.
You know, this is what's wrong with society.
Diane.
Nobody thinks about the world outside themselves.
Case closed, right? Diane is a hypocrite who doesn't really believe in this stuff that comes out of her mouth. If you hate Diane, yes, she is an obvious hypocrite, and you can dig up other examples to support that conclusion. Then call it a day. But I disagree. Partly because I'm a little stupid, and mostly because I kinda like Diane and want to give her the benefit of the doubt. I believe that Diane truly wants to do the right thing. But like most of us, Diane's desire to do the right thing is corrupted by two mitigating factors. These two factors intertwine and combine to make her do the wrong things even when she truly wants to only do the right thing. The first factor is kinda cringe, but the dark side usually is. Some dead nerd said virtue is its own reward. I am pretending I don't know the name of the dead nerd so I look cool, but that's not the important part. The important part is that Diane doesn't believe virtue is its own reward. Instead of pursuing virtue for virtue's sake, she has an ulterior motive.
Tell me about your father.
Well, he was a mean, sadistic alcoholic who never supported anything I did and actively delighted in seeing me fail.
Nobody in Diane's family likes her. Her parents never supported her dreams, and her brothers resent her because she's not a loser like them. None of that matters though, because Diane's awful family still has a soft spot in her heart.
The stupid thing is, even now, I still just want them to be proud of me and think I did good.
Deep down, Diane is still just a little girl who just wants someone to pat her on the head and say, good girl. She wants approval from her daddy and mommy, her brothers, and the whole world in general, but the only people who give her any of the approval she craves are BoJack, Mr. Peanutbutter, and Sebastian Sinclair. She keeps BoJack around as a friend, marries Mr. Peanutbutter, and follows Sebastian Sinclair to a war zone. Now, wanting the approval of others is not always a bad thing. I mean, we all want recognition to an extent, which is why you should like this video. However, the desire for approval becomes a problem when it reaches certain extremes, because it starts to complicate moral calculations. This is what happens between Diane, Sebastian Sinclair, and the poor orphans of Cordovia.
But then I think about Sebastian St. Clair and going to work with him, helping people and making a difference. And I feel like I have a reason to get out of bed.
Diane goes to Cordovia to help out children orphaned by the Civil War, but she only lasts a few days. Sebastian Sinclair stops giving Diane the approval that attracted her to him in the first place because he's too in love with himself.
This way is the library I built, and over there is the statue of me building the library. And on that wall is a painting of me posing for the statue.
Diane finds this repulsive because it is, for obvious reasons, but Sebastian Sinclair makes a fatal mistake. Despite their faults, BoJack and Mr. Peanutbutter always know their place.
Diane? Tell me, please, Diane, tell me that I'm good.
But Sebastian Sinclair doesn't know his place.
I'm here to help these people. You're here to help me help them by writing a book about me, so people back home will give money to my foundation.
Diane hates this, and as she spends more time with Sebastian Sinclair, she comes to not like him so much because, shocker, he reminds her of someone.
Jesus, you don't care about any of these people. You're just using them as props for your big shot superhero act.
Does that remind you of somebody else? Somebody who pretended to stand up for women assaulted by Hank Hippopopoulos and then immediately abandoned them to run away to Cordovia when she didn't get the public admiration she was looking for? Somebody whose name starts with a D?
Damn!
I thought I could go far away and help people and be this best possible version of myself.
That's obviously not what she does. Yes, Sebastian Sinclair was not the man he appeared to be, but no matter how narcissistic he was in his approach to charity, he was doing something for those orphans. He was building hospitals and libraries and he was feeding them. If Diane didn't like how he did things, she could just have exposed him and let someone else less self-absorbed take his place. That would have been the right thing to do. But Diane doesn't do that. She just packs up, abandons the orphans, and never thinks about them ever again. Except when she's lying to her husband about being in Cordovia when she's actually getting drunk on BoJack's couch.
I couldn't. I wasn't the person I thought I was.
Diane doesn't realize how her desire for approval undermines her desire to do the right thing. The reason why the right thing is so hard to do is because it's usually not popular. If it was, everyone would do it. People like Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King were assassinated because they were doing the right thing. We call them heroes today, decades and decades after they died, but when these guys were alive, they were the most hated men in America. That's why they got shot. Diane doesn't grasp the harrowing reality of heroism. She has the Hollywood fantasy that she will do the right thing and everyone will clap for her and say she's great and love her. When that doesn't happen, she bails. And Cordovia isn't even her first rodeo. She pulled the same cut and run move with the victims of Hank Hippopoulos when the hate from Uncle Hanky's fans got too intense. It's actually why she went to Cordovia in the first place. These two factors intertwine and combine to make her do the wrong thing, even when she truly only wanted to do the right thing.
And that way, everybody knows what I want. And I know what I want. Which is what everyone wants, and it's really clear, and nobody's confused about anything.
As you can hear it straight from the horse's mouth, Diane marries Mr. Peanutbutter even though she doesn't really want to. She has no idea what she wants. She isn't sure if a wedding is the right move, but she plows ahead anyway because after dating for a couple of years and moving in together, getting married is kind of the next logical step. She is full of doubts.
The wedding was so much fun. It was the happiest day of my life. But, you know, what does that say about all the days I have left?
This marriage ends when Diane tells Mr. Peanutbutter about her fantasy of having a library like Belle in Beauty and the Beast. Mr. Peanutbutter builds that library for her in their new house. You'd think that Diane will be happy to have a fantasy come true, but she freaks out and divorces him because it's quote-unquote too much. It's the dumbest excuse to end a marriage that I've ever heard on TV or in real life. Yes, Mr. Peanutbutter didn't listen and had his own host of issues, but Diane was not a good wife. Remember how she sabotaged his campaign for governor?
First, they need to get Woodchuck Kudchuck Berkowitz recalled, which is basically impossible. So that actually makes it really easy for me to be supportive.
Diane didn't want Mr. Peanutbutter to be governor, but she acted all supportive at first because she was sure he wasn't gonna win. When he eventually fails to get enough signatures for a recall, Diane just gaslights her husband.
Now that there's no chance you will ever be governor, I can tell you honestly, yes. You would have been great.
This ringing endorsement from his wife puts Mr. Peanutbutter back in the game. Diane is still all fake supportive until it starts to look like he's actually gonna win. That's when she turns against him and opposes him publicly.
I get it. So, like always, you're mad at someone, so your solution is to air your dirty laundry for everyone to see.
Yes, Mr. Peanutbutter was a terrible candidate. He didn't believe in anything, and he was just a puppet for Katrina and her corporate lobbyist friends. You know, just like every other politician who's ever existed. But Diane was his wife. She could have been honest with him from the start if she didn't want him to run, or she could have even tried to shape him into a good candidate. But that would make too much sense. Diane chose to gas him up when she was confident he was gonna lose, and then became his biggest critic when he suddenly started looking like a winner. When she discovers that her public opposition gives him the hots for her, she keeps doing it, but now their public policy arguments on TV are just a creepy form of foreplay that everyone else is unwillingly forced to participate in.
Frag me, Mr. Peanutbutter! Frag me!
This is because of the second mitigating factor that stops Diane from doing the right thing. You could call it cowardice, laziness, or a combination of both. This clip explains it perfectly.
You don't love Starbucks, you love the independent coffee place, it's just that the Starbucks is more convenient.
Yeah.
Diane wants to support the independent coffee place, but she doesn't go there. She goes to Starbucks because it's more convenient, but she doesn't think of herself as a Starbucks girly. She's still an independent coffee place girly. Makes perfect sense. And she is not just doing this for coffee. She's doing it for almost everything. In almost every scenario where Diane does the wrong thing, despite her desire to do right, you can see the same trend. Doing the right thing is too hard, so Diane does the convenient thing. It's why Diane Diane sticks with BoJack. It's why she marries Mr. Peanutbutter. It's why she pretends to support his gubernatorial campaign, then sabotages it. It's why she's silent about Sextina faking an abortion to sell albums. It's why she abandons Uncle Hanky's victims for the orphans of Cordovia, and then she abandons those orphans for BoJack's couch. At almost every point where Diane is faced with the choice between doing the right thing and doing the convenient thing, she chooses convenience, unless the right thing can get her some approval, which it usually doesn't, so she cuts and runs. But Diane still thinks she's a good person through it all despite all the evidence to the contrary. So why? Why is Diane so blind to her own hypocrisy? Well, she's actually not. Not entirely, but for the most part she is. And it's all because of an incorrect self-image. Like all hypocrites, Diane isn't really the person she thinks she is.
You know what your problem is? You're trying to be a Zelda, but you're so obviously a Zoe.
The Zoe-Zelda dichotomy is based on twins from Mr. Peanutbutter's show. Zeldas are fun, optimistic, and always see the bright side of everything. Kinda like Mr. Peanutbutter. But Zoes, well, Zoes are dark and cynical. They're relentless pessimists who always see the negative side of everything. Kinda like Diane.
Ugh, don't label me. You don't know who I am.
Diane doesn't accept this classification, but her ex, Wayne, who knows her very well, tells her exactly who she is.
We're Zoes, Diane. We're cynical, and we're sad, and we're mean.
And that's how Diane brainwashes herself into thinking she is good and morally superior despite all evidence to the contrary. She just rejects the evidence. She's not a Zoe, she's a Zelda. Because Diane is unwilling to accept the very idea that she could be wrong, she's able to consistently rationalize her hypocrisy until she finally runs out of excuses. Then she's forced to confront the harsh truth about who she really is and what she has done.
I'm a hypocrite. I'm miserable, and I make other people miserable.
I regret everything!
But Diane doesn't stay bad forever. When her house collapses into a sinkhole, she is forced to confront the one person who is responsible for everything.
Jesus, you're right. Even when I was above ground, I wasn't satisfied. Oh my God, I'm the problem.
That first realization leads her to a second one.
Can I be happy? Am I busted? I'm a pit.
The moment Diane accepts that she is not the angel she always assumed herself to be, she starts down the path to actually becoming that angel. She meets a guy called Guy at work and gets into a relationship with him. She still has some old toxic traits, like getting mad when Guy buys her jacket even though they're in Chicago and that place is colder than Hitler's heart. She used to do the same thing with Mr. Peanutbutter, but Guy is not Mr. Peanutbutter. He doesn't freak out when Diane freaks out at him. He's calm and patient. It's the kind of maturity that Diane has never experienced before. She falls in love. Diane loves Guy so much that she actually does the unthinkable. She moves to Chicago to be with him. You know the love is real when someone moves to Chicago of all places. There's no other reason to move to that frozen wasteland that overcompensates for not being New York by having thicker pizzas, a thicker governor, and more crime.
When I'm with him, I feel like I'm part of an us. Every other relationship, I always felt like a me in a relationship.
That's a massive improvement. When Diane was with Mr. Peanutbutter, she always had one foot out the door. But with Guy, she's all in. She is so all in, she even follows him to Houston when he moves there to be closer to his son. But this is still Diane, so she throws a wrench in the works.
We're probably gonna break up soon anyway. There's only so long before he gets tired of the real me.
The real Diane is a slob who leaves garbage all over the apartment and doesn't change her pants for 3 weeks. And it's Chicago in winter, so showering is certainly out of the question as well. You know, it's almost like Diane is trying to sabotage the best relationships she's ever had. Why?
Love? I didn't grow up surrounded by love. That's the problem.
Diane has never been loved unconditionally. Her family hates her, and she always had to hide her dark side with Mr. Peanutbutter. Either consciously or subconsciously, Diane is testing Guy's love for her. She wants to see just how far she can push him before he snaps. Part of her doesn't believe she deserves love, and she engages in self-sabotage to make that belief come true. But surprisingly, Guy is not surprised by the real Diane. He knows all she needs is love and he's patient through her tantrums. Diane is trying to write a book of essays, and 6 months in, she's still trying to write the first sentence.
I grew up in Boston town because my father, who I never was close with, lived in Boston. That's not right English. I'll fix it later.
Diane is depressed, but she doesn't want to take antidepressants because they make her gain weight. It takes some work, but Guy convinces her to take antidepressants. The antidepressants work too well. Diane's depression goes away and she gains weight, sure, but she also writes a book. The only problem is that it's not the book she wanted to write.
My book is supposed to be a profound treatise on damage, but I can't even access my damage.
Instead of a long, sad rant about how terrible life is like she initially wanted, Diane writes a fun novel about a food court detective who solves crimes around the mall.
I need help. Someone's been filching onesies by the twosies from the 4th floor baby hole, and if I don't figure out who done it...
The book is based on a girl who was rude to Diane once in a clothing store after she complained about the clothes not having sizes on the labels.
Sure, I think it would help if you figured out why you need to put a number on your body and let me get back to this mystery. Thanks.
The book, Ivy Tran, Food Court Detective, is a hit. Guy loves it. Princess Carolyn loves it and thinks it has franchise potential, and even Guy's grumpy teenage son, who hates Diane because he wants his parents to get back together and openly hates the book because it's a stupid book for girl losers, secretly loves it. But Diane hates it. Ivy Tran, Food Court Detective, is not the book Diane wants to write. She wants to write a book of essays about the war on women and everything that's wrong with society or something along those lines, but she just can't. Every time she tries writing anything about it, her brain sabotages her.
Your damage isn't interesting and you're unworthy of love.
When Princess Carolyn asks why she feels she has to write her sad book of essays instead of the fun detective novel, Diane's answer reveals a lot.
If I don't, that means that all the damage I got isn't good damage. It's just damage.
She also realizes something unsettling, annoying, enraging.
I have gotten nothing out of it, and all those years I was miserable was for nothing. I could have been happy this whole time.
As Princess Carolyn digs further and further into it, we finally get to see the source of all Diane's problems. The source of all the contradictions in her character and her moral cowardice. The reason why she's hypocritical, self-sabotaging, and somehow still condescendingly superior.
When I was a little girl, I thought that everything, all the abuse and neglect, it somehow made me special.
That is Diane's problem. She thinks she's special. She believes that having unsupportive parents, terrible brothers, and no social life in high school made her trauma extraordinarily special. It made her kinder, gentler, and more empathetic than everyone else. Diane believes that her circumstances and her suffering made her uniquely qualified to point out all the problems of the world and maybe even solve them. But she's not any of those things. As traumatic as Diane's experiences were to her, they're not that unique. Her parents were bad, but not bad enough to get nominated for anything at the Bad Parents Awards. Same thing with her brothers and her bullies at school.
You think you're a beautiful salad bowl? Conceited much? More like garden variety, am I right?
Lots of people have unsupportive parents, and lots of them have terrible siblings. Diane thought she had undergone this extraordinary form of suffering while everybody else was having an awesome childhood, but that's not true. We all suffer in our own ways. The realization that her suffering is just mid instead of extraordinary is painful, but Diane finally accepts it. She accepts the fact that she's actually basic, that she's just like us. That frees her from the prison of her self-imposed savior complex. She marries Guy, and she writes fun detective novels, and she is finally happy. And she does actually do the right thing in the end. Instead of depressing little girls with stories about how terrible the world is, she brings a little joy into their lives. But is she worse than Mr. Peanutbutter's complete disregard for others? I think so, and if you don't agree, click here to find out why. And I'll catch you next time.